Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm Mark Owen. Somalia is making a small step, perhaps, to a kind of democracy this Wednesday. It's chosen its new president. Just over an hour ago, Somalia's ex-Prime Minister Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo won the presidential vote after the incumbent Hassan Sheikh Mohammed admitted defeat. Now, this is clearly a big moment for a country usually referred to by the media and by diplomats as a failed state. And perhaps a good reason, given the troubles that Somalis have lived through: dictatorship, Islamist terrorism, famine and war. But choosing the Somali president is not an act of the people as such. Members of the parliament in Mogadishu get that privilege. This forum is a dense representation of the views and interests of the various factions, clans in Somali society. So you're left with the thought that it's democracy, but perhaps not as we know it in the West. It comes out of a traditional structure of clans, each with a chief representing their people, who select the clan representatives, who have selected the president. Nonetheless, it is a start on that road to democracy, and many see this as a very positive thing. The clan structure is the only thing that survived all the troubles of the past 30 years. We'll meet our guests after this from Nadia Massi.
Somalia's new president faces an uphill battle. From security to corruption to foreign policy, Somalis are hoping that serious reform can help make the country safer and grow the economy.
From my point of view, I believe change is needed. Because the country's situation was very bad over the past 4 years in terms of the economy and security. We don't want the current president.
One of the greatest challenges is terrorism. Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Shabaab frequently launches attacks against civilian and military targets. Only last week, 28 were killed in a suicide car bomb outside an upmarket hotel in Mogadishu. And on the eve of the election, militants and peacekeepers from the African Union battled just outside the capital. Such is the country's reputation as a hotbed of Islamist extremism that Somalia is one of the 7 Muslim-majority countries whose residents are barred from the United States. At home, a severe drought has pushed nearly 3 million people to the edge of starvation, and the United Nations warned last week that the country is again at risk of famine. Corruption among the political elite is another key concern for ordinary Somalis.
I would suggest to cut off the parliamentarians' budget and increase the budget of the security forces. We are civilians, and we need to work for ourselves. We don't need a salary from the MPs.
Although Wednesday's election was billed as the nation's most democratic in nearly 50 years, reports of votes being sold for as much as $30,000 apiece alarmed observers. Above all, critics say the new president needs to prove he is as determined to rout out corruption as he is to tackle Al-Shabaab terrorism.
Nadia Massi's report there. Let's bring in our guests for our debate. Somalia's new president, can Farmajo bring peace and prosperity to the country? We have James Andre, France 24's roving international reporter, who's reported extensively from Somalia. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. Pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
The other side of our studio, they're not necessarily against James, you understand. Roland Marshall, CNRS Senior Fellow. That is the Sciences Po Research Facility, is it not?
Yeah, I'm a CNRS, but I'm based in a laboratory that belongs to Sciences Po.
Okay, and you know lots about Somalia, I'm told.
I have been researching for 26 years.
You have the look of the man who knows what he's talking about. Joining us from afar, from Mogadishu, we have Mohamed Mubarak, who is director of the Makati NGO. Thank you, sir, for being with us. We'll bring you in a moment's time. Let's start here in the studio. Roland, in terms of what we've seen today, do you get a positive feeling about what will happen next in Somalia?
Let us say, again, we got a parliament. The parliament cast the vote without pressure. That's positive. Now the new president is known by Somali people. He is popular because basically under him salaries were paid regularly. Now he has some liabilities. His character is known as not very easy. His arrogance has been denounced by fellow politicians as well as diplomats from the international community. I think he appears, for the little I know, as elected by those who wanted to get rid of Hassan Sheikh. So it's more a negative vote, like in many elections, like in France in 2012, than a positive election about political agenda. Let us maybe take a breath. Look at really what has been happening over these days, and then see what team, because the constitution, the Somali constitution, is very paradoxical. On one side, the president is not, is just in charge of appointing a prime minister. Then the most power should go to the prime minister. But the reality of power in Somalia is the president is actually running the cabinet.
So this man, extremely important. James, what is your feeling about what this man can bring to the country?
Well, my feeling is the problem is how much of the country he actually rules. The fact of the matter is, indeed, this political process is, can be criticized, but it's true that it's also a first step. It's true that it's a country that is extremely failed in a very, very difficult situation in which billions of dollars have been poured over the last 20 years to try and fix it, to prop up government, etc. But last time I went, for example, basically in Mogadishu, all the Somali government controlled at that stage, this was a few years ago, this was 2011, was the airport, the piece of road to the Villa Somalia and the Villa Somalia. So that's as much as they did control. Now, back then, the Shabab had decided to move out of Mogadishu. That was just, a few days before I went there last time. But the fact of the matter is, that didn't mean that the government was controlling the whole of the city. It's much more complicated than that. And the fact of the matter is, how much control will this new government, even if it is composed of decent people, will actually have within the country? And that is obviously not obvious. And then there is, of course, the problem of endemic corruption. Some observers say that as much as $20 million have changed hands over this election itself. But once again, the process obviously cannot be perfect in a country in the state Somalia is. It's impossible to have an election where everybody casts a ballot. It's totally impossible. Security would be an absolute nightmare, not to mention, the logistics of bringing those ballot boxes back. But still, it's a step in the right direction.
$20 million.
That's what some observers
changed
say.
hands.
Yeah,
Which,
I quote the New York Times.
In the context of Somalia, is an absolutely phenomenal amount of money, isn't it? I mean, 20 million in France. Wow, some people would say it's just small change in some politicians' back pocket, but in Somalia, this is a massive, life-changing, community-changing amount of cash, isn't it?
Well, I would be careful. I know there have been a lot of talks, including when I was in Mogadishu, so late January, about the corruption, the amounts of money that change out. I'm not going to disclaim that, but if you look this election, Farmajo wasn't the most likely candidate.
That's true. Yeah.
And despite others, including Hassan Sheikh, had much more money to spend to get elected, they failed. So which means that, okay, money is important, but money is not the only drivers in such a competition. And you have to admit that the system is actually working in different manners. Corruption might be the right term for us, but in Somalia it's sometimes a bit, the lines are blurred, and therefore you have to be more careful in assessing, what has been happening. And I doubt, for instance, that much money has been spent to get a number of voters against Hassan Sheikh today, because for the last weeks there have been a campaign among the young parliamentarians, because that's one of the new features of this parliament, that this election should be Somali. They shouldn't be driven by Ethiopian influence, that we need new people, we need change. And so to campaign for that, you don't need money.
So are you saying, I think you said something earlier about corruption, were you implying that we shouldn't judge it the way we judge corruption in the West?
It's not that it's different. We have to be extremely aware of corruption. It's really a very important issue in Somalia, as any country in the world. What I'm saying is, let us not analyze this moment just in terms of corruption, because that is not the explaining parameter.
But the election hasn't been bought. That's the important thing.
Yeah, of course, there haven't been. No election ever has been bought. Look, 2012 2012, the incumbent at that time was Sheikh, the former leader of the Islamic Court Union. He had much more money than Hassan Sheikh Mohammed. Hassan Sheikh Mohammed got elected. So let us be a bit careful in the way we analyze those votes. It doesn't mean that the system is right. I'm very concerned about the way the business is, any business, significant business has to pay, gifts here and there. How certain people play gatekeepers and so on. But again, let us look at every phenomenon and analyze them properly.
We are debating whether the new president in Somalia can bring peace and prosperity to the country. Here in our studio, Roland Marshall from the CNRS. Thank you for that input so far, sir. James Andre, our international affairs correspondent as well, with his insight. I've got the green light now to go to Mogadishu and bring in Mohamed Mubarak, director of the Makati NGO. Mohamed, thank you for being with us on the debate here. Can I start by asking your reaction to the election of Mr. Farmajo as the new president of Somalia?
Okay, and for the past day, and I've been asked a lot if Hassan Sheikh is going to win because of his money, and I've said that along, and I thought that, and I believe that, and it happened, and I agree with one of the panelists here. And when it comes to the presidential elections at the parliament level, you cannot buy the votes of the parliamentarians, and simply because they are politicians who look out for their interests, not because of anything else. And they've had very bad experience with Hassan Sheikh, and on top of the corruption and not paying salaries for a whole year and siphoning off all government funds in order to fund his election, I think he has been personally a very bad person to deal with. So they voted him out because he was dead politically. And one of the reasons was because of his lack of personal skills, and generally he wasn't a very good leader. As for the effect of corruption on the parliamentary elections, it was massive, and it had an effect. And MPs could win by paying $1 more than their contenders, and the reason was they were paying delegates who were not politicians and who just were collected from the market. So bribery will work on the public, but it will not work with the politicians. That's what we've seen in 2 elections.
Mohamed, do the people in Somalia have any faith in this system? Because we understand it is just a small number of people who get to vote and get to have a say.
And tonight I was surprised. I went outside and I've never seen such a large crowd. I could say tens of thousands of people who are marching, and spontaneously. Nobody planned it. Nobody expected Farmajo to win, and people are expecting Sheikh Sharif to win, but he did win.
I'm sorry, Mohamed, was that people in the streets celebrating almost?
Yes, people on the streets, as far as the eye can see. I've never seen so many people like that. I've never seen people hugging and congratulating security forces. Normally, they are considered the scum of the art because they normally rob people and mistreat them. But tonight, everybody was happy, and you could see people using security and government and cars and with the soldiers, which has never happened before because both sides don't trust normally each other. And it shows you the enthusiasm for Farmajo, and because of his track record. Last time he was prime minister, he did something very simple, which is big in Somalia today, which is he used to pay the salaries on time, and especially for the security forces. When he was sacked last time by the former president Sheikh Sharif, and massive protests were held in support of him, and he's very popular. So people are really optimistic.
Mohamed, bear with us. We'll bring you back very shortly. Mohamed Mubarak from the NGO Makati, speaking to us from Mogadishu. Very positive reaction, it seems. People taking to the streets, which I imagine by your experiences of Mogadishu, isn't something that happens very often.
Yeah, it did happen in 2012. No, I'm not that surprised. Again, you have to look the broader picture. The broader picture is who is going to be the prime minister. what is actually the political agenda of Farmajo, because we haven't talked about that, and actually, he used a very political discourse full of stereotypes and clichés, as all others. Okay, I'm not criticizing him, and so there is this unknown, and I guess when the new cabinet is appointed and goes to the parliament, then we will see whether the population will still.
So we're still waiting to find out what he has in his agenda, what he has to implement.
Well, again, what we see today is a reaction against perceived interferences, a need for change. It's very difficult from those reactions to presume a very specific political agenda. We know Farmajo as very staunch nationalist, very critical of AMISOM and the international community. He could have done that as a prime minister because the president was actually handling those relations. Now, as a president, how is he going to compromise with the USA, his own country, because he's an American citizen? How is he going to deal with AMISOM, the Ethiopia, that supported actually Hassan Sheikh, and then, frame again a strategy to get out of this hole?
Well, I'm actually need to leave it there. I think you've been reading my script because that's what I've got planned for part 2. I'm glad you brought that up now. Thank you very much indeed. Our guests primed and ready for the continuation of our debate after a very short break.